Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast of your favorite team in the Bay Area. And on today's episode, we are going to kick off draft week by looking at the three biggest questions the Sharks face as they head into the NHL draft. So all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Sharks.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm your host, JD Young, contributor at San Jose Hockey Now and Fear the Fin. I want to thank you, of course, for making us your first listen of the day, free and available wherever you get podcasts. And, of course, you can subscribe on YouTube as well. And it's draft week. We finally made it, people. This is why you lift all those weights, as Bill Parcells once said. We've made it, guys, to draft week. So wanted to kind of actually, this is an article I wrote for Fear the Fin. So I was going to do the old synergy thing where the article should be coming. I think it'll come out on Tuesday, but then also kind of wanted to talk about it as well on the podcast. But before we dive into the biggest questions that the Sharks face with the draft this week, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has got you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. So yes, we've made it draft week. As of I'm recording this at like almost 2:00 Sunday afternoon. So if a GM is announced at some point before the time that I record this and then it comes out, I'm sorry. I apologize that I don't have actual GM. So if as soon as GM news comes out, I will try to do it as a emergency podcast as quickly as I can. It seems like we're down to Ray Whitney or Mike Greer as the finalists. So but let's dig into some of the big questions for the Sharks. So three big questions they have, I think, that we're going to be covering today is, will the Sharks move a major contract? Are they going to be able to acquire more picks, including a potential second rounder? And then who do the Sharks actually take at number 11? So let's start out with, I think, the juiciest of them is if they're going to be able to move a major contract. So kind of potential guys that could be moved. I kind of, thought up of four contracts. So Radim Simek, Brent Burns, Kevin Labanc, and pick one of the goalies. So let's start with kind of the easier one. So Radim Simek, he is a potential just because it seems like that. I think there's going to be a separation at some point between the Sharks and Simek. Simek was clearly not happy at the way he was utilized this season. He said that, after the season when he was playing for Team Czechia. With Simek, it's going to be a little bit tough because he still has 2 years left at his $2.25 million contract. And I mean, unless there's a team that's really desperate to get to the salary cap floor, I think you're going to have to attach an asset, whether that's like a 5th round pick or something like that to move him. That could be a potential. But yeah, I think Radim Simek's days in San Jose are most likely done. You could try to bury him in the AHL. It's not worth buying out his contract with 2 years left. You wouldn't really save that much money, and then you're going to have him on your books for 4 years. So I think he's most likely going to be on another team next year. Again, if the Sharks have to attach an asset or something to get rid of him, it might be one of those things where I think it's just better for both parties since he never really was kind of the same guy after his knee injury. So Brent Burns is another one. He's kind of the big fish that's going to get you the most assets. But again, he holds all the cards with his 3-team trade. Dane and I did a really good podcast a couple of weeks ago about Dane Lewis of Locked On Stars about trading him to the Dallas Stars and kind of what that would look like. So yeah, go check that out. Who knows with him? I think that's, I'll put it at like a 30% chance of happening. And even I feel like that might be way too high to begin with, but who knows? Next is Kevin Labanc. So Labanc's interesting because he is probably his value's at like its absolute lowest right now, especially since he had a terrible season and missed, the majority of the season with a shoulder injury. He still does have 2 years left on his $4.725 million deal, which I can't believe he only has 2 years left. It feels like he just signed that, but I mean, time is a flat circle. So, again, I think you'd be selling him at his absolute lowest right now if you did try to trade him. But I mean, is getting 50 cents or 25 cents back on the dollar worth it just to be able to utilize that $4 million or nearly $5 million elsewhere? So we'll see. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Labanc does have a nice bounce back season next year to, no matter if he's in San Jose or if he's elsewhere. So, and then finally, one of the goalies, though, Elliot Friedman did have his 32 thoughts on Saturday night, where he thinks the Sharks want to keep James Reimer, but that could just be one of those things where they haven't gotten a good enough offer for James Reimer. But at the same time, so I think Kaapo Kähkönen is the safest out of the three, and then it just depends on if the Sharks get a good enough deal for Reimer or if they can get anything for Adin Hill. So one of those, I think, is one of those guys is probably, who knows, maybe a Bonino or somebody like that. If they were on the way out, I don't think those are kind of more trade deadline deals. Like anybody who's on an expiring contract, those deals are potential trade deadline deals. And as we get to the end of the offseason and stuff, we'll look at guys who might be traded at the deadline, of course, as the Sharks season kind of pans out. But for guys who could be, traded at the deadline, especially or at the trade deadline where teams are, I think draft picks are actually at their lowest value just because you're in the draft. I think that those are kind of the potential guys that could be traded just because, it's, the Sharks are going to be trying to potentially acquire more picks. So before we look into the Sharks acquiring more picks and what that might look like for them, let's go ahead and take a quick break and talk to you guys, of course, about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for your betting needs and sports info. Find out the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including Major League Baseball. You've got all the craziness that it's happening right now in the NBA free agency. BetOnline's got your continuous source for your sports wager information, including live betting, which is super fun, esports, and scores. And they remain the best spot for your sports scores, podcasts other than this one, and news this season. So head over to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, so the next big question for the Sharks is, do they get back into the second round or do they try to acquire more picks? And we know, again, we don't know who the GM is right now, but we do know that like Joe Will, Tim Burke, and Doug Wilson Jr. are going to be running the draft. And these guys are more than capable of making moves up and down the board to try to acquire picks and stuff. And Joe Will does kind of have the blessing to make a big move. So I assume that there's going to be somebody in play, a GM in place before we actually get to the draft. I would be shocked if it feels like we're this close right now and we still don't know who the GM is. But so a couple things, if they want to, Doug Wilson Jr. did say on Friday's press conference that, they are looking to try to get back in the second round of the draft, especially with this year where it feels like, we've talked about this a bajillion times, where basically after pick number 5, it's all just a big mismatch of players, and who knows who could be available there if, rising and falling. So a couple ways for the Sharks to get back in. They could, of course, trade down from 11 and acquire some extra picks from there. Especially if you maybe you want like Brad Lambert, but you think you can get him a little bit later, you trade down, maybe try to pick up a pick later there. Again, with this year's draft, like I said, I don't know who's trading up type of situation. So unless maybe like a team like the Wild where they have like 19 and 24, maybe they package both of those and then the Sharks give up 11 and like a later round pick to kind of even it out type of thing. That's a potential. Then you're getting kind of 2 first round picks. Again, potential, but is 2 guys worth Frank Nazar or Jonathan Lekkerimäki or something like that? Who knows? Especially with this year's draft. So they always say more swings at the apples. So another way too is to potentially move a contract. So we talked about some of the guys before. I think of the guys. You maybe might be able to get like a late second round pick for James Reimer. But he does have, I think he's got a limited trade where he can go. So I think it's like 10 team. He submits a 10-team trade list. Let me pull it up right now. Sorry guys. A 5-team no trade list. So he's basically, you can trade him to a majority of the league except for 5 teams. So maybe, but it'd be like a cup contending team. So say like a Toronto or something like that, if they wanted to just kind of fill, maybe the Sharks trade Reimer and they eat half his salary. So then Toronto, who's, going to be up against the cap again this year, they're getting James Reimer for like $1 million and you kind of sweeten it up to like a second round pick type of thing. So, and I mean, for the Sharks, if they're eating $1 million to get a second round pick, I think they would be very happy with that. So, who knows? They could also maybe trade like their 3rd round pick plus some other stuff to kind of move in. So you could look at, because they do have 2 5s this year and 3 7s. So they could maybe potentially trade some of their picks this year to move up, or they could trade one of their picks from in next year's draft. If anything, I would actually try to acquire more picks in next year's draft, just because next year's draft is supposed to be much deeper. I think it's gonna be a lot like the 2020 draft. We're gonna have generational talent up front, but then it's gonna be much deeper, where you're gonna be getting potentially first round guys and this, kind of creeping into the 2nd and 3rd round type of thing. So if anything, I would be looking to acquire more picks into next year's draft. But I think most teams are kind of gonna be in the same situation where they are not willing to give up a lot of next year's draft, just because you never know how a season goes. I mean, we've personally seen this where all of a sudden you're giving up, unprotected first round pick, then becomes the number 3 pick in the draft, and you don't have the rights to that pick. So I think they're going to be hesitant to move any of next year's pieces to try to grab somebody this year. Unless it's, like maybe like a mid-round pick next year or something like that. But I think that like picks 1, 2, and 3 in next year, your first, second round picks, I would be surprised if they traded those. So, and then another kind of big thing for them too is, looking at, some of the trades. Like if I think the best way to try to get a second round pick would be the Brent Burns trade. So, we've talked about before with Brent Burns, where maybe the Sharks, if they eat, some of his salary, maybe if it's like they eat $2 million for the next 3 years on his out of his $8 million salary. So, Brent Burns, of course, he's got 3 years, $8 million left on his contract. So his contract does expire at the end of the 24-25 season. We know he wants to win a cup, and I'm pretty sure the Sharks aren't winning the cup here anytime the next 3 years. So, if he wants to, he waives his no movement clause, or, the Sharks and him work together to find a team. I think that would be the best way to try to get back in the second round. So, and especially if you kind of model it off the Duncan Keith trade from last year, where, Chicago sent Duncan Keith to the Oilers, and, there's a lot of, some differences. Duncan Keith is a little bit older and his contract was less expensive and it only was 1 year, but Brent Burns, granted, he's 1 year younger, but he's still a much better player than Duncan Keith is at this age. Brent Burns is still. I think if Brent Burns is your second pairing defenseman on a good team, I think you could be doing a lot worse. So, and we've talked about before with Brent Burns, if he's not playing, I think if you get him in that 23 to 24 minutes a night instead of the 25, 26, 27 minutes a night, I think you're going to get a more effective Brent Burns. So placing him on a team that's a potential Stanley Cup champion that maybe they're missing that right-handed shot, or they just want to kind of add to their depth. Trading for Brent Burns to a team like that, or a team like Dallas, where we've talked about a bunch of times, as like they're kind of in that weird spot where they have a lot of like kind of older players, like your Pavelskis and your Jamie Benns, et cetera, et cetera. But then you also have a lot of young, exciting players, Ottinger and, Heiskanen and Robertson, and like maybe like the way they kind of blended that team. And I think like all their young guys are really kind of hitting their primes right now, but then like their core piece, their older pieces are still, effective pieces. Like Joe Pavelski's had one of his best seasons last year with the Stars, and Jamie Benn, Ben, he's not the same guy he was, but he's still an effective like third line center type of guy. So I need a Brent Burns to that team, especially if they're going to be losing John Klingberg. I think Burns could step in and fill that role of Klingberg pretty easily. So I think he might be a little bit better than John Klingberg, at least defensively right now. So, and then having actual real offensive pieces around him you might see that numbers, and especially now with them hiring Pete DeBoer and Steve Spott's back, and we know how much Steve Spott loves to run that power play through Brent Burns at the point with Joe Pavelski tipping. It's gonna be like watching the Sharks circa 2017 all over again. But before we get to the final big question facing the San Jose Sharks, I did want to talk to you guys, take a quick break, let you guys know, of course, about the NHL draft, which is first round is Thursday night. So, of course, thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen every day with a draft on Thursday night. Our team of local experts and draft experts are breaking down with insights analysis with every first round pick. So join me 15 minutes after the Sharks pick for immediate reaction to your team's moves. Subscribe to Locked On Sharks on YouTube for the latest breakdowns and live reactions on the NHL draft and more. All right. The final big question facing the Sharks. Who did it actually take at number 11, right? This has, of course, been the big question since they found out they're going to be picking 11 is who do you take? And we've profiled. We've done 16, episodes on draft profiles of covering these potential first-round guys who could be there for the Sharks and, might be who they picked and go look to pick. I'm going to do kind of my final rankings of them later this week. Probably Wednesday or Thursday, kind of doing a final rankings of who the Sharks, I'll put them in tiers of like, yes, I'd love to pick them. I'd be happy with them, et cetera, et cetera. I got to kind of do my homework. I still haven't decided who I want the Sharks to pick. I know we're a week still, and I still don't know who I want the Sharks to pick. Like last year, it was like, go get William Eklund, and that was it. And we did. But this year, there's a lot more uncertainty, and just depending on what day it is, you could talk me into another person. So I'm very much getting Brad Lambert feelings again. And Frank Nazar is kind of knocking on the door, and yeah, Korchinski, and then of course, and Lekkerimäki as well. So, but yeah, who are they going to pick? Because this person is going to be, you assume, kind of helping with this iteration, this next core of the Sharks, right? Where it's going to be your 2020 draft class. Eklund, and then pick number 11 here. And, you think that these guys are going to be your next core. So you really, really can't mess up this pick, right? You don't want to blow the pick. And I have all the trust in Tim Burke and Doug Wilson Jr. to get this pick right. Just because I think that they've done a good job of restocking this pipeline, which was barren for a long time and had every right to be barren. When you're trying to win a Stanley Cup, you trade picks and you trade prospects, and you try to do everything you can to win a cup. But I think what this group of people have done in a short amount of time to kind of resupply this prospect pool should be applauded at what they've done. So and like looking at the cases, so I'll just kind of run through the cases again really quick. So the kind of the crash course with Brad Lambert, where it's you see it, all the tools and everything like that. But there's a lot of red flags when it comes to point production and switching, this year he's going to be on his fourth team in like 3 years type of stuff of things. So, and his rights were just acquired in the WHL by the Seattle Thunderbirds. So that's, there's potential that he might be playing, in North America next year, and whether that's, in the AHL or if that's with the Seattle Thunderbird. I don't think he's going to go back to Finland or there. I think he's going to try to come over here, and I think it'd be smart to have, have them kind of more closer to home, especially if you're the Sharks. And if he's playing in Seattle, like you can kind of, I don't want to say keep an eye on, but he's closer there, and you can kind of, let him go play in the WHL and just dominate, on what's going to be a really good Seattle team next year, especially with Korchinski. And, they're probably going to be making another WHL championship run type of team. So, I think he would be I think there, of course, a bajillion red flags. You couldn't easy to talk yourself out of it, but if you want to swing for the fences, man, and if he hits, you're looking at a premier blue chip talent that you're adding to the Sharks prospect pool, and potentially pairing him with Eklund for the next 10, 15 years is really exciting. And I think too with him where I wouldn't be surprised if he's playing NHL games in like 18 months type of thing. So we'll see. He still has a lot of development to do, but there's a lot there that you can, there's a lot there that you can really like. So, and then like Lekkerimäki, who already has like an NHL caliber shot, and we've seen him and Eklund play together really well, and just that chemistry that those two guys already have. And there's, I think with him, the worst case scenario with him is he turns out to be like Kevin Labanc. And I mean, Kevin Labanc's a fine player, and I'm trying not to kill Kevin Labanc, but like getting Kevin Labanc in the 6th round is great. Getting Kevin Labanc with this 11th overall pick is not so great. So, but again, if he hits too, you're looking at a potential 40 goal scorer in the NHL, because that shot is absolutely nasty, and it's just going to get better and better and better. So, and he has a lot of creativity, and his skills with the puck on his stick. Yeah. And then you look at a guy like Frank Nazar, who I didn't think was going to be there for the Sharks, but now it feels like that he might be kind of slipping down the draft a little bit. And he could be a guy where it's kind of the same thing, where he's just absolutely insane offensively, and he's kind of going to be on that Thomas Bordeleau path where he already plays defensively really well coming out of the development team, and then he's going to go to Michigan, and I think probably 2 years at Michigan, and then it's probably going to be the same thing where he's going to be playing AHL, NHL games soon. So, and just getting a two-way center and adding like a legit two-way center in the prospect pool would be really, really great, because they just don't have a lot of, I think Tristan Robbins is still questionable if he's going to be a center or a wing. Ozzy is going to be most likely a wing type of thing. And yeah, so I think just adding like a legit center to the prospect pool, you coming away from the draft, you're going to feel really happy with that. So, and then, Kevin Korchinski, who, I think is out of that like next tier defenseman is probably the safest, where he's going to, he may not have the offensive skills of some of the other guys, but like he's going to play good defensively, and he's big, and you can't teach size, et cetera, et cetera. I think for him, especially with the Sharks, they don't have that blue chip defensive prospect, and I think Korchinski would be a great way to kind of add to that blue line that kind of desperately does need some more talent. I know we like Gannon LaRock, and we like Hataka and all these guys, but they're there's a reason these guys were taken in the 2nd or 4th round or 6th round type of thing, where it's just they have their flaws, and that's fine, and not every prospect's gonna be perfect, but adding a guy like Korchinski who could, really solidify your defensive, the defensive pairings, especially that left side right now, which is basically Mario Ferraro and a bunch of question marks on it. And, I know Korchinski's probably not going to play in the NHL for a couple of, maybe 2 or 3 years, but like, it would just help to kind of be like, okay, at least we can pencil this guy in soon. So yeah, that's going to be it for today with the 3 big questions. So again, Do they trade a big contract? I think they do trade. I think the Sharks are active with the trades, and I think an NHL roster player will get traded off the Sharks come Thursday or Friday. Going into the week, I would be surprised if they didn't trade at least one of their NHL players. So do they try to get back in the second round? I think they try. I don't know if unless they trade Brent Burns, I don't know if they have the ammo to try to move up back in the second round, but maybe they move around with their third round pick, or maybe they package up maybe some of their fifth and seventh round picks and try to add something somewhere else. So, and then what do they do at 11? I still don't know, guys. I'll answer that. I'll try to answer that on another day, but yeah, we made it, guys. The draft. So please make sure you're following along Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram over at Locked On Sharks. I will be, especially draft night, I'll be running, manning all those. You'll be getting the graphics and my commentary on it. So I'll be most likely tweeting from the Locked On Sharks account instead of my personal account. My personal account, you can still follow me at my fry hole. But yeah, for draft stuff for Thursday and Friday, I'll probably be on the Locked On Sharks, kind of get the dust off that, because it's been a little quiet over there since there really hasn't been anything to talk about. So, and then of course, as soon as the GM is announced, try to do something, if it's an emergency podcast, or we'll try to, depending on the timing for that. I've got notifications set, so I'm constantly checking my phone, just like you guys are. I will try to get an emergency podcast. Hopefully it's like soon, because I'd rather not do it while I'm at work. But anyway, so you can also listen Apple, Spotify, Odyssey, all those great places. If you're on Apple, please do leave a nice review. I don't think I've gotten one. I'm checking right now. Let's see. No, I haven't gotten one. I gave you guys like a bajillion episodes last week and still no new reviews. That makes me sad. So if you haven't, please give a nice 5-star review. You're probably gonna end up with like 7 episodes this week, just because you're gonna have your 5 Monday through Friday ones. You're gonna have most likely a emergency GM one, and then you're gonna get a Friday night after the draft's done. I'm gonna do a nice breakdown of kind of get to know you with all the new players on the Sharks, and kind of do some quick profiles on them, so that way we can kind of get into the newest boys in teal. So, and then of course you can watch everything on YouTube. So we've hit our 1,000. I appreciate you guys for that. We're going to keep going, try to make this the best damn podcast that we can make it. So now that you're done listening to this one, go check out the Locked On NHL podcast, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow. Bye, friends.